So this is task 2 of the cooling and lubrication labs that we're doing. This one's called the cooling system inspection and pressure test. Yeah, the first thing you want to do is make sure we fill in all this information if we have it. If I give you an engine only, then you're just going to fill in this portion here, and then I'll give you the rest of the information on this car as far as the year, make, and model of the car. The objective for this lab is for you, the student, to inspect, pressure test, and determine location of leaks and any needed repairs the cooling system may need. Okay. The materials you're going to need, obviously, eye protection, radiator pressure tester, flashlight, or a light if you're indoors to see what's going on, coolant and or distilled water, and then that vehicle here or the engine. Now, again, two things. Always you have your glasses on, and number two, you never open the cooling system if that radiator cap is hot. Okay. Now, the first thing we're going to do is remove the radiator cap, okay, and top off the cooling system. And on top of the radiator cap should be a number, and that number is going to be anywhere between 8 and 15 or 16. And then it should have LBS next to it somewhere. That's how many pounds that cap is rated for. What we want to do is fill in that information right here. Go ahead and write that right here before we even start applying pressure or hooking up the pressure tester to the system. Just go ahead and note that here. Also, before we start to apply pressure, go ahead and fill in that same number here, because that's as high as we're going to pressurize the system, is what that cap says. That's what the system's rated for. Okay. So once you have that number here, go ahead and hook up the pressure tester to the radiator neck or wherever that you need to attach it, and you're going to pump that coolant tester up to that pressure that you have written here, and then you're going to leave it. While this is sitting here, we're going to go ahead and inspect all of these things. We're going to inspect the belts, hoses, fan, radiator, anything that has to do with the cooling system. Also, this is a good time to check for any leaks. You want to look around and make sure there's nothing leaking from the engine. Also, once you're done, after you take off the pressure tester, go ahead and look in the radiator or the expansion tank and look at the appearance of the coolant. Does it look like it's in good condition? Does it look rusty? Give me a description of the appearance. Okay. Now, after you've done all this, and this should take about 5 minutes to do, you want to check your pressure again and see if it's the same as the pressure you have here that you pumped it up to, or if it's different, and you want to note that number here. Okay. The next thing you have is the system results, circle 1, and you want to circle pass or fail. It passes if these numbers are the same, and it fails if these numbers are different after 5 minutes. So you want to go ahead and circle one of those once you're done with that. Now, after you're done testing the system, go ahead and get the right adapter for the cap. And again, you should already have this number here for the cap. Here for the cap. And then go ahead and pressurize that cap and see if it can hold that much pressure, and then note what it held here. It may be what the cap is rated for, it may not. And so that's your job to check. Now, if it does hold that correct pressure, go ahead and circle pass. If it's not holding the correct pressure, go ahead and circle fail. Okay, and then your recommendations. Are there any repairs, or is there anything that needs to be replaced? Okay. Now, what do you inspect belts for? And we've gone over this before, but we're going to inspect belts for cracking, for stiffness, for dryness. We want to inspect anything that may cause a belt to not work correctly. And then what do we inspect our hoses for? Again, we want to inspect it for any bulging or cracking or ballooning or softness. You want to go ahead and look both of these up and be very specific in the textbook, in the chapter on cooling, and you will find that information there, not just what I'm telling you right here in this demonstration video. Okay, so once you have all this filled out, go ahead and bring it on over to me, and we'll take a look at it and get you signed off. So for Lab 2, our cooling system inspection, what we're going to do is actually pressure test our system. So what we want to do is come over here, come over to our cap. Okay, we want to touch the cap, make sure it's not warm or hot. If it's warm or hot, we're not going to remove it. We're going to put a fan on this until it does get cool. Once it's cool, then we can go ahead and remove the cap. Now this type, what you have to do is push down slightly and then turn, and that will come off. Now we also want to check the cap. This would be a good time to look at the cap. I want to make sure that this rubber seal here is good, as well as this rubber seal here is good. We're going to pressure test this by itself in just a moment. So we're going to do the pressure test on the cooling system first. And what we're going to use is a pressure tester. This end has the gauge, and this is the pump. We actually can apply pressure. Okay, and this end actually attaches to our radiator or to our expansion tank if that's what we have. If that's where we add our coolant. So, one piece you need to know: this wing nut on top. This needs to be at the bottom when you install this. Okay, so go ahead and press this on. This particular car, it doesn't need an adapter, but some cars may need an adapter, and you can just choose from the box of adapters and see which one fits best. But go ahead and screw that on. Make sure that this wing nut is not on top, or it'll be loose and won't be able to hold pressure. Go ahead and move that wing nut so it's at the bottom. You'll feel it. It'll feel tight. After that, in our system, we don't want to go above about 15 pounds on our gauge. So we need to be looking at our gauge here. Zoom in on our gauge. Okay. We don't want to, 15 is right about here. We don't want to go any higher than that on our system, or otherwise we risk blowing a hose or something bad happening. So we're going to keep it at 15. So we're going to go ahead and just pump this up. I'm getting close. I'm at like 13 and a half, 14, 15. Try and zoom in. 15. So I'm going to leave this here for about 5 minutes, just like the lab says. While I'm doing that, I'm going to go ahead and inspect my belts as well as my hoses, look for any bulging, look for any problems that I might have. Do that check while it's pressure testing. My pressure starts going down. That's usually a sign that I have a leak somewhere, so I need to go into the car, check where that's coming from, see why I'm losing pressure in the system somewhere. But in the meantime, let's go ahead and check the hoses and the belt. So here are my hoses. I've got an upper radiator hose. I'm going to look here and see where it attaches to the radiator. I want to actually put my hands on this, and I want to kind of, well, while it's not under pressure, it's better to squeeze it. I want to feel it, make sure it's not bulging out anywhere. My lower hose is way down here. You can't see it very well, but I want to check that down there too. My belts are right here. You want to check the underside with the light. You aren't looking for any cracking on the belt, any fraying. You actually want to put your fingers down here. Of course, the engine is off. But I want to actually feel this. I want to feel if it's hard or brittle on that belt. But sometimes they're a little hard to see. You're going to have to kind of come at this at a different angles to get a good look at the belts, see what kind of condition they're in. Check the hoses, see what kind of condition they're in. Now I've got my lower radiator hose down here. I've got an upper radiator hose up here. And then I also have in the back these two lines right here, if you can see those. Those are my heater hose lines going back to my heater core inside the vehicle, and that's what's going to keep us warm on cold days. So I'm going to look at those hoses too, just make sure no rubber is bulging or cracked or anything like that. But you're responsible in this lab to make sure that those hoses are checked out. My upper and lower radiator hose, and then my two heater hoses. We've let this go for about 5 minutes after we checked everything out, and we're going to look at our gauge again, see where we're at. If we're at 15, or where we stopped, that's good. If we're not, we need to note that on our lab sheet and state why. Look for our leak and see if you've got a leak somewhere in the car. And after that, to remove this, you got to be really careful.
because now we're under 13, 14, 15 pounds of pressure. It's cold, but still, if we undo this, we're going to have a lot of coolant spraying out. So what we do is, with this wing nut, we slowly turn this, and you'll hear the pressure relieving as I do this. You don't want to wait till that gurgling stops. Go ahead and go a little bit farther. A little bit farther. You can watch the needle as it goes down. Once it gets down to 0, that means I have no pressure. You might get a little coolant that comes out the top of the neck, and that's okay. Just take your time taking it off. And so we can put our radiator cap back on, but we're not quite done yet. We do have an adapter in our kit for actually checking our cap. It looks like this. Okay. So on one end, screw the cap on, and on our cap, right here, it'll tell us what the pressure is. So on this one, it actually says 16 pounds of pressure that this can hold. So with this, we're going to use the same pump that we use for our cooling system, and we're going to pressurize our cap to 16 pounds and see if it holds pressure. If our caps aren't working right, that's going to cause an issue for our cooling system too. It can cause overheating, it can cause all kinds of problems. So checking our cap is super important. So you can just kind of lay that down to pump this up. Now I'm pumping, I don't know if you can see this, even though I pump this up, it's not holding pressure very well. Try this again. There it goes. We're at about 13 pounds there. I'll try and get it back up to 16. You can see it's not holding that. Okay. So it's designed for 16, and we're only getting 13. At this point, I would say this cap is bad, but there's going to be up to you to decide for what car you have if you can't pressure test the cap. Now, this car we can. You might give you a car that can't, so we might have to scratch this part off. But if you have a car that we can fit the adapter on, I want you to pressurize the cap as well.